Customers witnessed everything change in just 3 seconds. The moment the armed robber burst through the door and raised his weapon, shop assistant Emma's facial expression underwent a dramatic transformation. Not fear, but calculation. Not panic, but cold composure. A sudden sharpness appeared in her eyes, as if another personality within her had awakened. Her posture shifted, shoulders tensed. Even her breathing pattern changed. At that critical moment, everyone in the shop began wondering the same thing. Who was this young woman really? The early morning hours at the neighborhood corner shop in Manchester were typically peaceful. Emma had taken her usual position behind the counter, beginning her daily routine. 26 years old, average height with brown eyes. This young woman had been working at the same shop for 6 months. Customers thought they knew her. Quiet, hardworking, always wearing a friendly smile. But none of them had asked detailed questions about her past. That morning, business had started a bit slower than usual. The first customers had just arrived. Retired Mr. Thompson picking up his daily milk, and neighbor Mrs. Patterson collecting her morning newspaper and bread. Emma greeted everyone with her usual courtesy. Her speed at scanning barcodes, the way she handled change, the eye contact she maintained with customers. Everything displayed perfect professionalism. However, for those who observed carefully, there were some peculiar details. Her hands, for instance. Despite appearing soft, there were fine marks on her fingertips, those characteristic hardened areas that form on the fingers of people who regularly handle firearms. Or her stance. Her feet were always positioned shoulder-width apart, maintaining a posture that controlled her center of gravity. It was quite an athletic and balanced stance for an ordinary shop assistant. From her very first day working at the shop, Emma's eyes had been in constant motion. She wasn't just looking at customers. She was regularly checking the door, windows, emergency exits, and the back of the shop as well. No one had noticed this behavior because she did it so naturally that it appeared to be nothing more than a conscientious employee being attentive. Actually, Emma's story of coming to this shop wasn't simple. She had served as a military police officer for 5 years, participated in 12 different security operations, and received specialist marksman training. But this information remained buried in her past. Nobody knew. When she moved to the city, she had wanted to turn over a new leaf, found a peaceful job, and tried to build a normal life. However, some skills never disappear. Her reflexes in dangerous situations, risk assessment abilities, rapid situation analysis skills, these had been ingrained in her body's memory. That morning, as she stood at the till, a corner of her mind was constantly evaluating environmental security without her realizing it. The corner shop sat on Willow Street, nestled between a small cafe and a charity bookshop. The area was generally quiet during morning hours, mostly serving local residents, picking up essentials. Emma had grown familiar with the regular customers. She knew their preferences, their usual shopping times, and their small talk topics. The shop's layout was typical of British corner shops. Narrow aisles packed with everything from newspapers and sweets to basic groceries and household items. Behind the counter where Emma worked, cigarettes were displayed in a locked cabinet, and the till was positioned to give a clear view of both the front door and the shop's interior. What customers didn't realize was that Emma had memorized every aspect of the shop's security setup within her first week. She knew which floorboards creaked, where the blind spots were for the security camera, and the exact distance from her position to each exit. This wasn't paranoia. It was professional habit from years of training. Around 8:30, the door chime sounded, and a different-looking man entered. Emma's trained eyes immediately noticed. This person wasn't an ordinary customer. His walking pattern, the way his eyes swept across the shop's interior, the position of his hands, everything indicated he was planning something. Emma's pulse began to quicken, but there was no change in her facial expression. Only that familiar sharpness had returned to her eyes. The man began moving slowly through the shop, but Emma could tell he wasn't actually looking at products. His gaze was studying the security cameras, the exit door, and the position of the till. There was a bulge under his jacket, most likely a weapon. Alarm bells began ringing in Emma's mind, but that warm shop assistant's smile still remained on her face. The man began wandering slowly through the shop, but Emma could see he wasn't genuinely examining products. His gaze was studying security cameras, the exit door, the till's position. There was a noticeable bulge under his weathered leather jacket, most probably a weapon. Emma's mind began processing alarm signals, yet that genuine shop assistant smile remained fixed on her face. In this situation, she knew exactly what needed to be done. The first rule of military police training: assess the situation without panicking. Calculate your options. Implement the safest solution. She moved her hand toward the emergency button beneath the till, but didn't press it yet. First, she needed to understand the man's true intentions. The suspicious individual paused at the milk section and turned around. At that moment, Emma could see his face clearly. Approximately 35 years old, with unkempt stubble, eyes constantly darting about. What caught her attention most were his hands, trembling, tense, inexperienced. This person wasn't a professional criminal. He was most likely someone desperate, attempting something like this for the first time. Emma's training had taught her this. Inexperienced individuals were more dangerous because they were unpredictable. Professional criminals follow their plans, but amateurs can panic and do unexpected things. This situation required a more careful approach. The man spent several more minutes wandering through the shop's cramped aisles, picking up items and putting them back down. Emma noticed he kept glancing toward the front window, checking if anyone was watching from outside. His nervous energy was palpable, the way he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, the perspiration on his forehead despite the cool Manchester morning. The shop's familiar sounds continued around them. The low hum of the refrigeration units, the occasional creak of the old wooden floors, the distant rumble of morning traffic on Willow Street. Everything seemed normal to any casual observer, but Emma's heightened awareness picked up on subtle changes in the atmosphere. She began calculating distances and angles, from her position behind the counter to the front door. Approximately 12 feet. To the emergency exit at the back, 15 feet. But that path was blocked by several display stands. The till area had good visibility, but limited mobility. Her military training kicked in as she automatically began assessing tactical advantages and disadvantages. The man finally approached the counter, and Emma could sense his escalating nervousness. His breathing had become more labored, and she noticed a slight tremor in his hands as he approached. This confirmed her assessment. Definitely an amateur, probably driven by desperation rather than criminal intent. Other customers began entering the shop. An elderly woman, a young mother with her small child. Emma's anxiety increased. Innocent civilians could be in danger. If a robbery attempt occurred, protecting these people would also become her responsibility. The presence of the child particularly concerned her, as children could react unpredictably in dangerous situations. At this point, viewers might be wondering what was really in this young woman's past. How could she remain so calm? What was the secret behind her composure? If this story is affecting you, don't forget to hit the like button and share which city you're watching from in the comments. Emma's eyes tracked the suspicious man while simultaneously calculating the positions of the other customers. If something happened, she was already planning how she could direct them to safety. Her position behind the counter was advantageous. She could see both the front door and the shop's interior sections. The man's jacket was unzipped, and she caught a glimpse of what appeared to be the handle of a weapon tucked into his waistband. It looked like an older model pistol, not military-grade equipment. This information was useful. It suggested he wasn't a professional, just someone who had acquired a weapon for this specific purpose. Emma's right hand slowly moved closer to the emergency alarm button beneath the till, while her left hand remained visible on the counter's surface. She maintained her customer service posture while preparing for potential action. Her breathing remained controlled, a technique she'd learned during high-stress training scenarios. The young mother with her child approached the counter area. Emma internally wished she could signal her to leave, but doing so might alert the suspicious man to her awareness of the situation. She needed to maintain a delicate balance. She gave the woman a subtle gesture, indicating she should wait a moment, but without making it too obvious. The suspicious man reached the front of the counter and placed his hand inside his jacket. Emma's muscles tensed. Every alarm system in her mind activated. She now knew with certainty this was a robbery attempt, and whatever action she took now would determine the fate of both herself and the innocent customers in the shop. In that critical moment, Emma's mind was processing rapid calculations. The man's weapon draw speed, her own reflex timing, the time needed to get customers to safety, police response time. These calculations were completed within seconds because years of training had prepared her for exactly this moment. The moment the man drew his weapon from inside his jacket, automatic responses developed through years of training kicked in throughout Emma's body. She felt time slow down. The adrenaline surge had sharpened all her senses. She could see the gun in the man's hand while simultaneously being aware of the positions of other customers in the shop. The weapon was a simple pistol, nothing professional grade. The man's grip was also incorrect. It was clearly evident he lacked experience. This information was advantageous for Emma. Dealing with an inexperienced person was easier because she could predict their movements. Her first movement was to slowly raise her hands in the air. She appeared to be surrendering, but was actually positioning herself. This movement allowed her to distribute her body weight optimally and put herself in a position to spring into action at any moment. Her feet were shoulder-width apart, and her knees were slightly bent. The elderly female customer screamed when she grasped the seriousness of the situation and began rushing out of the shop. This was good for Emma. At least one person was in the safety zone. But the young mother with her small child was still inside the shop, frozen in place like a deer caught in headlights. The robber was demanding money, but his voice was shaking. Emma could see just how nervous he was. This situation was both an advantage and disadvantage. Nervous people could exhibit unpredictable behaviors. Emma began opening the till, but moved very slowly. This way, she was buying time and trying to divert the suspect's attention elsewhere. With each movement, she was measuring the man's reactions, waiting for the most opportune moment to intervene. The shop security camera was recording, but this wasn't helping in the current situation. She calculated police arrival time. It would take at least 5 minutes. That was too long. She needed to create her own solution. The robber seemed to have relaxed a bit, thinking Emma had surrendered. This misconception fit into Emma's plan. While the man's attention was focused on the money inside the till, Emma continued assessing her surroundings. Next to the till was a metal paperweight, a money counting machine. It was within Emma's reach. There was also a slightly raised section of floor beneath her feet due to cables running through the shop. This small height difference could be used to alter balance. As she removed the money, a stapler inside the till caught her attention. Small but solid object, it could serve as a defensive weapon if necessary. There were also metal paper clips within reach. Everything could become a potential weapon, just as her training had taught her. The suspicious man moved slightly closer to get a better view of the money. This was exactly what Emma had been waiting for. As the distance decreased, her chance of intervention increased. She could now clearly see how he held his weapon and the position of his finger on the trigger. The situation with the young mother was concerning. She was cornered with her child, seemingly frozen with fear. If she was going to make an intervention, she needed to consider these people as well. A wrong move could put them in danger. Different scenarios were rapidly processing in Emma's mind. First option, stall the man until police arrived. Second option, quickly intervene to neutralize him. Third option, give him the money and wait for him to leave. Each option had its risks. Behind the counter, Emma's training had taught her to use whatever was available. The heavy cash drawer could be a weapon. The metal security chain attached to the pen could be used to entangle or strike. Even the plastic bags could be used to obstruct vision if necessary. The man's nervousness was evident in his constantly shifting weight and the sweat beading on his forehead. Despite the cool morning air, Emma noticed he kept glancing toward the shop window, clearly worried about being seen from outside. This paranoia was another sign of his amateur status. The child with the young mother began to whimper, sensing the tension in the room. This added another layer of complexity to the situation. Emma knew that loud noises or sudden movements from the child could startle the already nervous robber into making a dangerous mistake. At this point, those of you wondering what Emma will do must be numerous. What gave her this experience? How will the story unfold? What would you do if you were in her position? You can share your thoughts in the comments. Emma began noticing small changes in the man's behavior. His initial nervousness had diminished. He was starting to feel secure. This indicated to Emma that the right moment for intervention was approaching, because the element of surprise had increased. Emma's awaited moment arrived. The man had relaxed somewhat, giving all his attention to the money inside the till. At precisely this instant, Emma sprang into action. With reflexes honed by years of military police training, she moved with lightning speed. Her first movement was to grab the metal paperweight beside the till with her right hand. Simultaneously, her left hand pushed the man's gun-holding arm outward. This coordinated movement was so rapid that the man couldn't understand what was happening. The weapon fell to the floor, and Emma immediately kicked it away, sending it sliding across the shop's linoleum surface. Taking advantage of the man's bewilderment, she made her second move. She came out from behind the counter and positioned herself behind the man, wrapping her arm around his neck. She applied the neutralization technique she had learned during military police training. Though the man resisted, he was helpless against Emma's strength and technique. Meanwhile, the other customers in the shop were trying to understand what was occurring. The young mother with her child had retreated further into the corner for protection. The elderly woman waiting outside had telephoned for police assistance. After Emma brought the man under control, she checked the other items in his pockets. His wallet contained identification. He was an ordinary citizen who had most likely resorted to this path due to economic difficulties. However, this didn't justify what he had attempted to do. The robber was laid on the floor, with his hands bound behind him. Emma had taken plastic cable ties from the shop shelves and used them for security purposes. Even with these materials, she was displaying professional binding technique, reducing the man's chance of escape to zero. The distinctive wail of police sirens could be heard 2 minutes later. Emma immediately returned behind the counter and resumed her normal shop assistant role. She prepared her identification card, ready to explain the incident to the officers, but she would present her intervention as an ordinary defensive reflex. When the police arrived, they were surprised. The robber had been neutralized on the floor, the weapon was in a safe location, and the customers were secure. They hadn't expected such a clean intervention. They asked Emma how she had managed it, and she simply said she had acted instinctively. However, one of the officers noticed something different about Emma's actions. The neutralization technique she had used, her security measures, and her control of the incident scene, these weren't the behaviors of an ordinary shop assistant. This person clearly had special training. While taking statements about the incident, Emma tried to provide as few details as possible. She didn't want to explain her past. She only stated that she had protected herself and the customers and had no other choice. The young mother customer thanked Emma profusely. If she hadn't been there, she didn't even want to think about what might have happened to her and her child. Thanks to Emma's composure and courage, no one had been harmed. The shop owner was extremely surprised when he learned of the incident. He had never imagined that Emma could intervene so effectively. He told her how grateful he was and mentioned wanting to improve her working conditions. But for Emma, the most important thing was that no one had been seriously harmed. She had finally used her years of training in real life and had been successful. However, she also didn't want this situation to attract attention. That evening, when Emma returned to her flat in Coralton, she reflected on what had happened. She remembered her days in the military police, realizing that the training she had received then had saved lives today. Perhaps she shouldn't completely leave her past behind. As people in the neighborhood learned about the incident, their perspective of Emma began to change. They now understood she wasn't just an ordinary shop assistant. Feelings of both curiosity and respect had formed within them. What was this young woman's story? They wondered. The local Manchester Evening News picked up the story, though they kept Emma's identity anonymous at her request. The headline read, "Hero Shop Worker Foils Armed Robbery," and described how quick thinking and bravery had prevented what could have been a much more serious incident. Emma's military police background had included specialized training at the Defense School of Policing and Guarding in Southwick Park. She had served with distinction in several overseas deployments, including peacekeeping operations in Cyprus and security duties in Gibraltar. Her expertise in close protection and crowd control had made her a valuable asset to her unit. The decision to leave military service hadn't been easy, but after 5 years of constant vigilance and high-stress situations, Emma had yearned for a quieter life. She had moved to Manchester seeking anonymity and normalcy, hoping to blend into civilian life without drawing attention to her unique skill set. The following days were different for Emma. Some of the shop's regular customers came specifically to see her. They would engage in ordinary conversations, but were actually trying to get to know her better. Emma noticed this attention, but continued to be careful about not revealing too much information about her past. A week later, there was a phone call from the police. In his statement, the arrested robber had mentioned how professional Emma's intervention had been. The police officer indicated they were curious about whether Emma had received any security training previously. Emma deflected by saying she had done some self-defense sports. The reality was much deeper than that. Emma had served 5 years in military police, participating in 12 critical security operations. She had received specialist marksman training and specialized in hand-to-hand combat techniques. But she had decided to leave all this behind and transition to civilian life. This decision hadn't been easy. During her service in the military police, she had encountered very serious situations. During one operation against an illegal weapons trafficking ring, she had been wounded in a firefight, but completed her mission. In another operation, she had tracked individuals with terrorist organization connections and obtained critical intelligence information. These experiences had strengthened her, but had also worn her down. Constantly being on alert, always expecting danger, having difficulty trusting people, she had made the decision to transition to civilian life. For these reasons, she wanted a calm, peaceful existence. When she moved to the city, she had opened a new chapter. Although she didn't change her name, she hadn't shared her past with anyone. When she found the shop job, she had only told her employer that she had previously worked in the security sector. She hadn't provided details, but now that robbery attempt had changed everything. The identity she had suppressed for years had emerged again. And perhaps this was inevitable, because some skills never disappear. They just remain hidden. When the shop owner called her into his office, Emma was anxious. Would she be dismissed from her job? She had attracted too much attention. But the owner said the complete opposite. He mentioned wanting to make her security manager, and that he could increase her salary. This offer made Emma think. Perhaps instead of completely rejecting her past, she could use it in the right way. Not to harm people, but to protect them. She could evaluate these skills positively in civilian life as well. That night in her flat, she thought long and hard. During her military police days, she had experienced very difficult moments. But at the same time, she had helped many innocent people. Perhaps this was her true identity. Being a protector. Being able to intervene when necessary. The next morning when she went to work, she had made her decision. She would accept the owner's security manager offer, but would have some conditions regarding working arrangements. Her identity would remain confidential, and she wouldn't answer questions about her past. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the shop changed. Emma was still the same kind and friendly shop assistant, but now she was also responsible for security. She monitored entrances and exits more carefully, detecting suspicious situations beforehand. Customers had also noticed this change. They felt safer in the shop, Especially elderly customers and families with children found comfort in Emma's presence. Other shopkeepers in the neighborhood had also heard Emma's story. They wanted to get to know her, but also respected her privacy. Rather than being overly curious about her, they showed that they were pleased with her presence. As we come to the end of this story, for those who are curious, it's not possible to learn more details about Emma's past. Unless she chooses to reveal them, this information will remain confidential. But what's important is this. Sometimes the most ordinary appearing people can have extraordinary stories hidden behind them. The incident had taught Emma something valuable about herself. She had spent years trying to escape her identity as a protector, but that identity was fundamentally part of who she was. The training, the instincts, the drive to help others. These weren't burdens to be shed, but gifts to be used responsibly. Emma's story teaches us something important. Every person carries a story. The shop assistant, cleaner, security guard, or taxi driver you encounter. You can never know what's in their past. Perhaps they possess the experience that could save your life. This story also shows that past experiences never truly disappear. They emerge at the right moment, in the right way. Emma had transitioned from military police to civilian life, but in that critical moment, all her training returned. Emma's choice was also significant. Instead of erasing her past, she decided to use it positively. As security manager, she could both utilize her old skills and help people. If this story has affected you, please hit the like button and share which city you're watching from in the comments. Have you ever encountered such a situation? Did someone you thought was ordinary display an unexpected talent? Or do you yourself have a hidden past? You can share your experiences in the comments. Finally, remember this. Heroes don't always travel in uniform. Sometimes they walk around in shop assistant aprons, sometimes in cleaning overalls, and sometimes in ordinary clothes. What matters is that they can take action when necessary. Emma's story ends here, but similar stories continue to be written every day. Perhaps one day when you encounter such a situation, you'll remember this story